The Baylor estate sat on the edge of the city like a fortress carved out of grief. Marble floors too polished to reflect anything but emptiness, hallways wide enough to echo the anxieties of anyone who dared walk through them. The air inside the mansion always felt a little too cold, a little too still, as if life itself had been banished from its walls. Anderson Baylor preferred it that way. At 38, he was a man who had succeeded in every arena, except the one that mattered most. A billionaire with a reputation built on ruthless intelligence and an iron spine, he commanded fear the way others commanded respect. His sharp blue eyes held the weight of storms, and the hard lines of his face made him appear permanently carved out of stone. Nothing softened him, not staff, not friends, not business partners, not the world outside that worshipped his wealth. Nothing except once, before his world shattered, before betrayal. 2 years earlier he had come home early, something he never did, and found his wife of 5 years laughing softly in the arms of his best friend. Not just laughing, kissing him, touching him with a tenderness she had long stopped giving Anderson. And the blow that nearly killed him came after. She was pregnant. Anderson had stood rooted, unable to breathe, unable to process how his perfectly curated life could implode in one instant. The woman he trusted, with every vulnerable corner of his heart, had not only abandoned him emotionally, she had been carrying another man's child while sleeping in his bed. That day burned itself into his soul. He never forgave her. He never forgave his best friend. And he certainly never forgave himself for loving someone who could betray him so easily. Since then, trust became a myth, compassion a weakness, warmth a threat. Everyone in his mansion understood this. They tiptoed around his presence, spoke only when spoken to, and prayed he would not notice them. Those who had worked in the household longest knew one rule: do not anger Anderson Baylor. He does not forget, and he does not forgive. So the mansion remained quiet, cold, lifeless, just the way he insisted it be. No laughter, no personal conversations, no warmth. Anderson himself walked through it like a ghost, wrapped in polished suits and deadened eyes, drifting from office to boardroom to bedroom and back again. He did not live. He functioned. He was wealthy. He was powerful. And he was utterly alone. The world believed Anderson Baylor was untouchable. But they did not know that a cold heart was simply a broken heart, hiding behind armor thick enough to choke out every remaining piece of humanity. And he intended to keep it that way. The Blacktown car pulled up to the service entrance of the Baylor estate just after sunrise. From inside, a woman stepped out, tall, warm-skinned, with a glow that somehow persisted despite a long life of hardship. Maureen Willow clutched her travel bag close as she took in the massive mansion, stretching across acres of land. It was beautiful, but it did not feel alive. It reminded her of winter. Maureen, at 27, had learned early in life that some places looked rich yet felt empty. Her grandmother used to say, money builds houses, but it cannot create homes. After her grandmother passed away a year ago, her only family, Maureen took work wherever she could find. At cleaning, cooking, nursing, she never complained. Her grandmother had raised her on love instead of luxury, and that was enough. But she needed stability now, and the domestic agency had placed her in the most intimidating job she had ever encountered. Ms. Grayson, the head of domestic staff, emerged from the door, her sharp gray hair pulled into a bun and her expression tight with the stress of keeping a billionaire satisfied. "You must be Maureen Willow," she asked briskly. "Yes, ma'am," Maureen replied softly, offering a polite smile. "Good, follow me. There are rules, and you must follow them with absolute precision." Maureen nodded. "I will." The older woman led her down a pristine hallway that smelled faintly of disinfectant and silence. "Rule number 1, Ms. Grayson began. You do your assigned work only. Do not deviate. The staff here runs on a tight system." "Yes, ma'am." "Rule number 2, you do not speak to Mr. Baylor unless he directly addresses you." Maureen swallowed. "Understood." "Rule number 3, there are areas of this mansion you do not enter. The East Wing, his personal study, and his coffee room. Mr. Baylor is extremely particular about it." "Yes, ma'am." "And lastly," Ms. Grayson said, her voice dropping even lower, "your presence should be invisible. No humming. No unnecessary movement. Be quick, quiet, respectful, and unseen." Maureen exhaled slowly and nodded again. She had heard about strict households. She had worked for demanding families. But nothing in Ms. Grayson's tone compared to the warning she felt beneath her words. This is Mr. Baylor's schedule, preferences, and the cleaning zones assigned to you." She handed Maureen a neatly printed packet. "Study it, memorize it, live by it." Maureen accepted it gently, and though the mansion's coldness prickled at her skin, she whispered silently to herself the words her grandmother had repeated since she was a child: "Warmth melts ice faster than fire ever will." So she lifted her chin and stepped into a world that desperately needed warmth, whether it wanted it or not. 3 days into her employment, the household was operating smoothly, silent and efficient like a machine. Maureen kept her head down, did her work, respected every rule. She had not once crossed paths with Mr. Baylor. Until the morning, everything went off routine. At 6:30 a.m., frantic whispers swept through the kitchen. "Amelia is sick." "Truly sick," one staff member murmured. "She is at the clinic," another replied. "Fever. She cannot make the coffee." The room froze in collective horror. "Mr. Baylor is expecting his coffee in 15 minutes. Ms. Grayson muttered, nearly panicking. The coffee was not just a beverage. It was ritual, sacred, unchangeable. Maureen watched as the staff looked everywhere for a solution. No one dared make a cup that was not identical to Amelia's exact recipe. Ms. Grayson turned sharply when she noticed Maureen standing near the door. "Willow, do not even think about it. You heard the rules. You are not to go near the coffee room." Maureen lowered her gaze. "Yes, ma'am." But as the minutes ticked by, the panic in the kitchen grew thicker. It was now 6:42 a.m. Maureen thought of her grandmother's voice again. Help when help is needed, even if fear stands in the way. And before she could stop herself, she stepped into the coffee room. The rich scent of roasted beans wrapped around her like an old friend. She moved quickly, confidently, a woman who had made coffee thousands of times for a grandmother, who loved it sweet and comforting. She ground the beans, heated the water, and added her grandmother's special touch: a dash of brown sugar cinnamon syrup, the exact recipe she had memorized from watching her grandmother's gentle hands. It always added warmth, depth, and a hint of nostalgia. At 6:56 a.m., she carried the cup to the dining hall where Anderson Baylor sat reading his morning reports with the cold intensity of a king surveying his empire. Ms. Grayson arrived seconds too late. Maureen. But Anderson had already lifted the cup. One sip, his brows drew together. His jaw stilled. The entire room held its breath. He set the cup down slowly, the tension crackling around him. "Who made this?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. Maureen stepped forward. "Sir, I did." Ms. Grayson nearly fainted. "You." His eyes pierced into her. "Why?" Her voice remained soft, respectful. "The kitchen was in distress, sir. Amelia was not available. I simply wanted to help. And you thought it appropriate to alter my coffee. I used cinnamon. And my grandmother's—" "I did not ask for your grandmother's anything," he snapped, "or your creativity." The room flinched. "You will never step into that room again. Never change anything regarding my coffee. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir," Maureen whispered. "Good." He stood abruptly. "I have business. Do not make this mistake again." He stormed away, leaving behind a suffocating silence. Maureen exhaled, her hands trembling. Ms. Grayson approached her, wide-eyed. "Do you have any idea what you have done?" Maureen bowed her head in apology. But later that morning, when Ms. Grayson returned to clear the table, her steps halted. The coffee cup was empty. Every drop gone. Her jaw fell open. The next morning, Amelia was back, pale but determined. She prepared Anderson's coffee exactly the way she always had, perfectly, scientifically, predictably. At 7 a.m., the cup was delivered to the dining hall. Anderson lifted it, took a sip, and felt nothing. It was bland, ordinary, lifeless. He frowned and took another sip. Still nothing. No warmth, no softness. No memory of the unexpected sweetness that had lingered on his tongue the previous morning. He set the cup down. His staff watched him with silent terror. Anderson cleared his throat, his tone icy. "Where is the new maid?" Maureen stepped into the doorway, her hands folded. "Yes, sir. Make the coffee today." Amelia froze. "Sir, but I am back. I can." "I said the new maid will make the coffee." The room stilled. Maureen bowed her head and moved to the coffee room. Her hands worked automatically, grinding, pouring, stirring, adding that gentle dash of cinnamon sweetness. When she returned, she placed the cup before him quietly. Anderson said nothing. He did not look at her. He simply lifted the cup and tasted it. This time he did not freeze. He did not speak. He simply breathed slowly, deeply, As if the warmth of the coffee thawed something he had not realized was frozen. He finished the entire cup without a single complaint. And nothing needed to be said. From that morning on, the mansion knew one truth. Mr. Baylor's coffee belonged to Maureen Willow. It was late evening when the mansion settled into silent routines and soft footsteps. Maureen was finishing her cleaning duties near the far west hallway when a faint sound drifted through the quiet. A sound she did not expect in a place like this. A sob. Her brows knit and she turned toward Mr. Baylor's office door, slightly ajar. A soft light spilled across the floor. Another choked breath reached her. She should not intrude. She should not even be this close. But something tugged at her. She stepped back, then forward again. Finally, she turned away and walked. Not to her assigned areas, but to the kitchen. She reached for the kettle and the beans and the cinnamon syrup. 10 minutes later, she stood at his doorway holding a warm cup of coffee. Heart pounding. She tapped gently. No answer. She pushed the door open by an inch. Anderson sat behind his desk, shoulders hunched, hands covering his face. Papers lay scattered around him like fragments of the life he once had. He did not see her, but he felt her presence. He lifted his head, eyes red, emotion he never allowed anyone to witness. "What are you doing here?" he rasped. Maureen set the cup gently on the desk. "I thought you might need this." "I did not ask for it." "I know, sir. You are not supposed to be here." "I know that, too." He stared at her for a long moment, caught between anger and exhaustion. Then he reached for the cup, not looking at her again. He drank slowly and something inside him broke. After several silent minutes, his voice cracked open. "My wife was pregnant." Maureen remained still, listening without judgment. "And the child was not mine. It was my best friend's. They betrayed me. Both of them." Her heart ached for him, for the rawness in his voice, for the pain he had been carrying alone. "I am sorry, sir," she said softly. His eyes met hers, tired and wounded, longing for something he did not recognize anymore. A little warmth, a little kindness, a little humanity. That night, in the quiet glow of his office, something shifted. Not love, not yet, but a crack. A tiny crack in a frozen heart. A crack made by a maid's warm coffee and a far warmer soul. And though neither of them fully understood it yet, that crack would change everything. In the days that followed their quiet moment in his office, something in Anderson Baylor began to shift slowly, cautiously, almost imperceptibly at first. But the mansion staff, who had spent years memorizing every tremor of the billionaire's moods, noticed it almost immediately. He no longer barked orders down the hallway. He no longer slammed his office door. He no longer stared through people with that glacial look that could chill bone. Instead, he spoke, softly, short sentences, still measured, still stiff. But there were words where once there had only been silence. And most surprising of all, he spoke to Maureen. Every morning at precisely 7 a.m., Anderson waited, not for coffee, but for her. She would step into the dining hall, her steps quiet and graceful, her polished skin catching the light, and place the warm cup before him. He watched her hands, the calm way she moved, the warmth she seemed to bring with her. "Good morning," he began saying for the first time in years. "Good morning, sir," she always replied, her voice like soft velvet. Sometimes he asked, "Sleep well?" Sometimes busy morning, sometimes simply thank you. And for Anderson, those 3 syllables, thank you, were mountains moved. In the kitchen, whispers flowed like water. "Did you see?" He didn't snap at her. He actually looked calm. Is this the same man, or did someone replace him? Miss Grayson, hands on hips, watched cautiously. She'd served this household through its darkest seasons, and though she didn't entirely understand the shift happening, she wasn't foolish enough to deny it. The truth came in small signs, a slight softening around his jawline, a breath that didn't sound like it carried the weight of the world, a lingering glance toward the kitchen door after Maureen disappeared behind it. He hadn't changed completely. Not yet, not even close. But the cold, unreachable billionaire was beginning to thaw. And all because one maid, a woman who moved in silence and carried warmth like a second skin, had unknowingly become the one person he now trusted quietly, cautiously in the shadows. Trust didn't come to Anderson in large gestures. He was too wounded for that. Instead, it seeped in through cracks, small, delicate, unexpected. One rainy evening, he called Maureen to his office under the pretense of wanting coffee. But when she arrived, he wasn't working. He was staring out the window, eyes hollow, fingers tapping restlessly on the arm of his chair. Maureen, he said quietly. Yes, sir? How do you stop your mind from running at night? He asked, his voice flat but laced with vulnerability. She blinked. Sir? He didn't look at her. I haven't slept well in years. I keep waking up, angry, confused, reliving everything that happened. His fists tightened. I don't trust anyone, not even myself. Maureen set the tray down carefully. My grandmother used to say that sleepless nights mean there's something in your heart you haven't poured out yet, she said gently. He scoffed softly. Your grandmother sounds wiser than most people I know. She was, Maureen smiled faintly. She used to sit with me on our tiny porch and tell me stories before bed. She said love, honesty, faith, those were the blankets that helped a person sleep. He turned to her, studying her face as though afraid to breathe too hard, afraid the moment might disappear. What happened to her, he asked. She passed away last year, Maureen said softly. She raised me herself. I never knew my mother, but I never felt unloved, not for a single day. That struck him deeper than he expected. Must have been nice, he murmured, having someone so steady. Yes, sir, she whispered, and I think everyone deserves someone like that. Even you. Something flickered in his eyes, something raw and unguarded. He didn't respond. But from that night on, when nightmares clawed at him, he found himself replaying her words, her grandmother's wisdom, like a lullaby soothing his unrest. In small ways, the mansion began to reflect the changes inside him. Fresh flowers appeared in the hallways, something the staff hadn't dared arrange in years. Windows were opened to let in morning light. The kitchen grew livelier, laughter returning in gentle waves. Maureen didn't know she was the reason, but Anderson knew. He felt her warmth filling the empty rooms he had let decay. He felt her presence brushing against the cold loneliness he'd built for himself. He felt trust seeping back into his life like sunlight through a cracked curtain. It happened on a Wednesday morning. Maureen stepped out of Anderson's office after delivering his coffee, and for the first time in years, a guard saw him smiling. Not a full smile. Not wide or bright, just a faint, subtle curve of his lips, quick, quiet, unexpected, but unmistakable. Did you see that? The guard whispered urgently. See what? He smiled. Mr. Baylor? Yes. Impossible. Maybe his face twitched. No, that was a smile, and that wasn't even the end of it. Later that afternoon, 2 kitchen workers nearly dropped a bowl of fruit when they overheard him say, Maureen, could you bring another cup later? If you have the time. If you have the time. A billionaire who once threw a fit when his coffee was 2 minutes. Late was now considering her schedule. Lord have mercy, one of the kitchen staff whispered. Is he turning human? Ms. Grayson stood in the corner, arms crossed, watching carefully. She wasn't against the change. She had prayed for years that Anderson would someday find peace. And though she couldn't fully understand it, she saw a truth unfolding, slow and certain. Maureen Willow was the warmth he'd been missing. The warmth he needed. The warmth he was beginning to crave. One night, a storm crashed through the city. Thunder rolling across the sky, rain hammering the windows like frantic fingers. Most of the staff had retired, but Maureen remained, finishing her last duties. At 10:47 p.m., she carried a cup of coffee to Anderson's office. He had requested one more. If it isn't too much trouble. She knocked softly. Come in, he said. He was seated behind his desk. Glasses perched on the bridge of his nose, the warm golden lamp spreading soft shadows across his face. He looked calm, less rigid, almost gentle. She stepped forward, handing him the cup. Their fingers brushed just for a second, but the air shifted immediately, thickening, warming, becoming charged with something neither knew how to name. Maureen froze. Anderson swallowed. For one terrifying, breathtaking moment, neither moved. Finally, he broke the tension by clearing his throat softly. Thank you, he murmured, his voice deeper than usual. You're welcome, sir, she whispered, her heart pounding. She turned to leave. But she didn't notice that behind her. Anderson watched her go with a look that was no longer just gratitude. It was longing, dangerous, fragile longing, and yet both of them pretended nothing had happened. Because how could a billionaire drown in the warmth of a maid? And how could a maid allow her heart to flutter? For a man whose heart was shattered, they kept the spark buried. But it glowed. Quiet. Undeniable. The next morning, the mansion felt oddly quiet. Too quiet. Maureen didn't appear with his coffee. Anderson tried to ignore it. He tried to read his reports. He tried to continue his routine. but he kept glancing toward the door. By 7:03 a.m., irritation flickered. By 7:10 a.m., worry replaced it. By 7:25, he snapped. "Where is she?" he demanded. Ms. Grayson stepped in. "Sir, Maureen? She's ill today. A mild fever. She's resting in her room." Those were the only words he heard. Ill, fever, resting. It felt like the air was punched from his lungs. Panic threatened to swallow him whole. "Send the doctor to her," he ordered. She said she just needed rest. "Send the doctor," he repeated. Ms. Grayson rushed out. But the rest of the day, Anderson couldn't function. He kept imagining Maureen alone, unwell, vulnerable. And every scenario reminded him of his own loss, of how everything he loved had been ripped from his hands before. Fear curled around his ribs like a fist. By evening, exhaustion and anxiety overwhelmed him. And when Maureen wasn't there to say goodnight, or bring coffee or breathe warmth into his day, he shut down emotionally. Coldness returned. Walls slammed back up. He barked orders, snapped at staff, retreated into silence. He hated that he cared. He hated that he needed someone. He hated that he was vulnerable again. Because vulnerability had nearly destroyed him once. Maureen returned the next morning. Pale, still tired, but dressed in her uniform. She brought Anderson his coffee at 7 a.m. sharp. He didn't look at her. Didn't greet her. Didn't soften. He was stone again. Maureen watched him, her heart sinking. Her grandmother had warned her, "Wounded souls run when they begin to care." So instead of leaving, she spoke gently. "Sir, you're pushing me away because you're scared." He froze. Slowly, he lifted his gaze. "What did you say?" His voice was low, dangerous, trembling. "You're scared," she repeated, stepping closer. "Scared that letting someone in means getting hurt again." His jaw tightened. "You don't know anything about my fears." "You told me them," she whispered. "Every sleepless night, every nightmare, every moment you doubt yourself. I listened, I cared, and I still care." Something shattered in his expression. Anger, fear, longing, all colliding at once. "Why would you care?" he whispered. "Because you deserve to be cared for," she said softly. "Because you deserve someone steady. Because you deserve to heal." His chest heaved. "You make me feel safe," he admitted, voice cracking. "I haven't felt safe with anyone since before the betrayal, and it scares me. It scares me more than I can explain." Maureen felt tears sting her eyes. She stepped closer, standing right before him. "Anderson," she whispered, using his first name for the first time. "I'm not them. I won't betray you." He closed his eyes as if her voice hurt in the sweetest way. When he opened them again, something soft and vulnerable flickered there. He reached out. Not to touch her, not yet. Just to close the distance between them emotionally. Their foreheads almost touched, just inches apart. Breaths mingled. Hearts trembled. And in that quiet, fragile moment, the walls he'd built for years fell away. For the first time since the betrayal, Anderson Baylor allowed himself to lean, just slightly into another soul. And Maureen stood steady, warm, gentle. Their closeness wasn't a kiss, not yet, but it was intimate, emotional, real, a silent promise of what was to come. It happened slowly, so slowly that neither of them noticed the shift at first. Anderson Baylor, once a man feared by every soul in his mansion, now waited for the sound of soft footsteps each morning. The echo of Maureen's movements had become the thing that eased him out of bed. A quiet rhythm that felt steadier than any alarm clock or business call. The mornings had changed. The house staff no longer walked on eggshells. They still respected him, of course, but the tension that once suffocated the hallways had lifted. Sunlight now spilled freely into the mansion because Maureen had started opening the curtains every morning. At first, Ms. Grayson had nearly fainted at the boldness. But Anderson said nothing. He simply sipped his coffee and watched the light pour in, watched it fill the shadows where he used to hide his grief. And Maureen existed in those halls like warm air drifting through winter. Her presence softened edges, mended quiet things, and stitched the broken fabric of the mansion back together thread by gentle thread. She had become part of every corner of the house. She had added small touches, not expensive, not grand, but somehow magic, fresh flowers in the hallway, folded blankets on the cold leather couches, a scented candle on a window ledge that once gathered dust. She humbly apologized the first time she added a vase of lavender to his office. But Anderson stared at it long before replying. "It is fine," he murmured, though he cleared his throat twice. That lavender stayed for weeks. Sometimes she found him in the library. Not working, not shut away, just reading. Something he had not done in years. and sometimes when she walked by, he asked her to stay. Not to work, just to talk. She told him stories of her grandmother, of evenings in a tiny kitchen filled with laughter and cinnamon, of a woman who had loved her through everything. He listened like a man hearing music for the first time. And then one quiet morning it happened. Maureen was wiping down the kitchen counter when she heard a low, quiet sound behind her, a sound that did not fit inside the cold, marble-coated mansion. A laugh. She turned. Anderson was standing by the doorway, chuckling. It was not loud or carefree or even unburdened, but it was real. "What?" she whispered, eyes wide. "You," he gestured to her, shaking his head with disbelief. She frowned. "Me what?" "You were talking to the toaster," he said, a smile still tugging at his mouth. "You told it to calm down." She flushed. "It was overheating." "Maureen," he said softly, still smiling, "it is a toaster." She covered her face with her hands and groaned. "Oh my God." But his eyes, warm, crinkled at the corners, held her there, held the moment. He had not smiled like that since before the betrayal. Something gentle fluttered inside her chest. Something healing stirred inside his. The confession did not come easily. Broken hearts never hand themselves back without trembling. But the moment itself was born from something small. A simple accident. Maureen was stepping down from a short ladder in his office, dusting the top of a bookshelf when her foot slipped. She yelped softly and lost her balance. Anderson was there before the ladder even wobbled. He caught her around the waist, steadying her, pressing her close to him without thinking. His breath hitched. Her eyes lifted to his, and for a moment the world froze. Not painfully, but beautifully. "Are you hurt?" he asked, voice low, shaking slightly. "No," she whispered, her hand resting on his chest. "Just startled." His fingers lingered at her waist far longer than necessary. "You could have fallen," he said, his voice thick with something he did not want to name. "It was just a slip," she murmured. But he was not listening to excuses. He stepped back abruptly, running a hand through his hair. He breathed like someone who had almost witnessed a disaster. And then, for the first time, he did not hide the emotion. "Maureen," he said quietly, "I cannot." He stopped. He swallowed hard. "I cannot lose you too." Her heart tightened. "Anderson," she whispered, stepping closer, "you are not going to lose me." "You do not understand," he said. "Every time I hear footsteps that are not yours, I wonder where you are. When you are late with the coffee, my chest tightens like something is wrong. When you are quiet, I think you are leaving." His voice cracked. "I know it is not fair. I know it is selfish. But I worry about you." Her breath trembled. "You worry because you care." But she did not say it aloud. Instead, she touched his arm gently. "Anderson, you do not have to be afraid with me." He closed his eyes. Pain and longing warred in his expression. Years of betrayal and loneliness battled against the warmth he felt now. And then, he broke. "Maureen," he breathed, opening his eyes to hers, "I love you." It was not smooth or rehearsed or confident. It was raw, shaking, honest. The confession of a man who had locked his heart behind steel doors, only to find a woman who walked in anyway. She covered her mouth, tears welling. You love me." He stepped closer. "I do not want to. God knows I tried not to, but I do. I love you in ways that terrify me." A tear slipped down her cheek. "Anderson," her voice was soft as a kiss. "I love you too." His breath stilled. Then he touched her face slowly, as if asking for permission. She nodded. Their lips met. Soft, slow healing. Not a kiss of passion or hunger, but of release. Of gratitude. Of two wounds finding a way to close together. When it ended, he rested his forehead against hers. "You have given me more peace than I ever deserved," he whispered. "You deserved healing," she replied, brushing his cheek. "You just needed someone to remind you." He did not propose with a grand gesture. There were no roses, no elaborate dinner, no violinists. Instead, it was a quiet morning, one filled with the smell of cinnamon coffee and the faint sound of birds outside the open window. Maureen walked into his office to bring his morning cup, but found him standing near the window with something small in his hand. A simple velvet box. "Anderson." He turned, no fear this time. No hesitation. Only clarity. "Maureen Willow," he said softly. "I do not want this house without you. I do not want mornings without you. I do not want a life without you. Will you marry me?" She did not cry immediately. She laughed first, breathless, disbelieving, joyful. Then she whispered yes, and the tears followed. The wedding was intimate, warm, beautiful. And yes, his ex-wife and former best friend were there. Sitting stiffly at the back row with tight smiles and eyes full of something sour, Anderson saw them staring. Saw their envy, their shock, their confusion, but he did not care. Not one. His entire world was the woman walking down the aisle in a simple cream dress, her brown skin glowing, her curls pinned gently back. She looked like peace itself. His peace. When they exchanged vows, Anderson's hands trembled. Tears filled his eyes as he whispered, "Thank you for giving me back my life." Maureen's voice cracked. "Thank you for letting me into your heart." After the ceremony, they slipped away for a small, quiet honeymoon, nothing extravagant. Just a beach house on a private coast where the waves whispered at night. And the world felt new again. They walked barefoot on the sand, shared slow kisses under the moon, held each other while listening to the sea. Anderson laughed more in those days than he had in the last decade combined. He held her hand like it was an anchor. She held his heart like it was something precious, and it was. It happened a few weeks after they returned. Maureen had been quieter than usual. A little tired, a little emotional. Anderson tried not to panic, tried to remind himself she was not leaving, that she was not hurt. But one evening she approached him in the living room with trembling hands. "Anderson," she said softly, "I need to tell you something." He stood immediately. "What is it? Are you okay?" She nodded slowly, then placed his hand on her stomach. At first he did not understand. Then his breath caught, his eyes filled, and every wall he had ever built broke apart in one shattering moment. "Maureen," his voice cracked completely. "Are you?" She smiled, shy, emotional, glowing. "We are having a baby." Anderson Baylor. The man betrayed, the man abandoned, the man broken by the past, dropped to his knees in front of her and wrapped his arms around her belly. His tears wet her dress as he whispered over and over, "Thank you, thank you, thank you." When he finally looked up, his face was streaked with tears, but there was pure joy shining through them. "I never thought I would feel this again," he whispered. "Never thought life would give me another chance." Maureen cupped his cheeks gently. "You deserved happiness all along," she said. He stood and pulled her into his arms, holding her against his chest as if she were the most precious thing in the world, because she was. Anderson stood behind Maureen, both hands resting on her belly, his chin nestled on her shoulder as they watched the sunset through the open window. A soft breeze drifted through the room. A new beginning. A new life. A healed heart. And Anderson whispered the final words with quiet, reverent love. "You melted a heart I thought would stay frozen forever." The Baylor mansion no longer felt like a museum. Gone were the cold, echoing hallways that once swallowed laughter before it could exist. Gone were the stiff rules, the fear, the unspoken tension that followed Anderson like a shadow. Now sunlight streamed through open curtains. Soft music drifted from hidden speakers. Fresh flowers sat in every hallway, lilies, roses, daisies, simple but beautiful. And somewhere in the heart of the mansion, the sound of laughter, light, warm, musical, flowed like air. Maureen's laughter. Anderson followed that sound more often than he followed any business meeting. He found her sitting in the nursery, a soft cream-colored room, painted with watercolor clouds and hand-stitched mobiles of stars above the crib. She was sitting by the window, a hand on her growing belly, the late afternoon sun turning her skin into gold. He stopped at the doorway, watching her with quiet awe. He still couldn't believe she was his. She looked up and smiled, her face glowing, peaceful, more beautiful than any luxury he had ever owned. "Anderson," she said softly, "you're staring again." "Because I still don't know what I did to deserve you," he replied, walking toward her. She shook her head gently. "You healed. You opened your heart again. That's what you did." He knelt beside her chair and pressed a kiss to her belly. Their baby responded with a tiny kick, and Maureen gasped, laughing through the surprise. "He knows your voice," she whispered. He looked up at her with a soft, emotional smile. "Or she knows," he countered playfully. "No," she said firmly, "it's a boy." "You're sure?" "My grandmother always said a mother knows." He placed his hand over hers. "Then I'll trust you." "I always do." She touched his face, then tracing the edge of his jaw with a tenderness that still made him breathless. "I'm proud of you, Anderson." "For what?" he asked quietly. "For choosing love," she whispered. "For choosing us." He swallowed hard. "I was lost before you came. I didn't realize how dark everything had become. You brought light with you, Maureen. Just by being you." She leaned forward and kissed his forehead. "And you gave me a home I never imagined having." A comfortable silence settled between them, filled with the soft ticking of the clock and the gentle breeze brushing through the curtains. After a moment, Anderson rose and offered her his hand. "Come with me," he murmured. "Where are we going?" she asked, letting him pull her gently to her feet. "You'll see." He led her through the house, their fingers intertwined, passing the rooms that once symbolized isolation and now symbolized healing. The living room where he first shared laughter with her. The kitchen where she talked to the toaster. The office where she found him crying and stayed. Finally, he opened a door near the back of the mansion. Maureen froze. It was a small room, simple, quiet, untouched for years. Not because it was forbidden, but because it held too many ghosts. His ex-wife had used it back then, decorating it in pale colors and expensive furniture. Anderson had locked it away after the betrayal, unable to look at it. Now, the room was transformed. Warm beige walls, a cream rug, a rocking chair, soft lighting, a bookshelf already filled with children's storybooks, and above the crib painted in beautiful cursive letters, "Baby Baylor loved before you arrived." Maureen pressed a hand to her mouth, tears blurring her vision. "Anderson, you did this." He nodded, emotion thick in his voice. "I wanted our child's first room to be filled with peace, not my past." She turned toward him, tears spilling over her lashes. "You healed more than I ever thought possible." He reached for her face, brushing the tears away with his thumb. "You healed me," he whispered. "You gave me something no wealth, no company, no empire ever could." "What's that?" she whispered. "Hope, love, a future." But he said only one thing. "A family." Her lips trembled. "Anderson." He took both of her hands and guided her carefully to the rocking chair. She sat and he knelt. Before her again, hands on her belly head, resting gently against her. "I promise," he whispered softly. "I will never let you feel unloved again, not for 1 second." Maureen's fingers ran through his hair as she blinked through tears. "And I promise to love you through every light and every darkness." They stayed like that for a long time. No pain, no fear, just quiet happiness. Eventually, Anderson lifted his head, kissed her deeply, slowly, lovingly. And in the midst of that soft, perfect moment, a little kick tapped against his palm. Their baby. Their new beginning. Maureen smiled through her tears. "He's saying hello," she whispered. Anderson pressed his forehead to hers. "Tell him I love him already." "I think he already knows." The room glowed with sunset light. Warm, peaceful, silent. Anderson Baylor, once a man frozen by betrayal, now stood beside the woman who melted him, preparing to build a life filled with everything he once believed he'd never have. Love, laughter, family, hope. He looked at Maureen, his wife, his healer, his miracle, and with the fullness of a heart restored, he whispered, "You saved me, and I will spend the rest of my life loving you for it. Thank you for being part of Whispers of Hope. Your love and support mean more than words. Together we're spreading light, one whisper at a time."